So, good afternoon, Olive and Andy. Hope you are both well. So, gosh, it's a long time since obviously we've spoken, Olive, with your change of role, and obviously we've met many a time, and same Andy, but probably for the people at home, they'd be interested, just sort of introductions and who you are. So I guess Andy, yourself first.
Yeah, great to see you, Olive and Kyle. My name is Andy Marsh. I'm Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset Constabulary. So I've led this force for over 5 years, and I was formerly chief in Hampshire. And through working with Olive and other colleagues in Avon and Somerset, I've learnt just how important location can be if we want to deliver world-class policing services for everyone.
Yeah, yourself, Olive?
Yeah, so nice to be with you as well and see you again, all of you. So yeah, I'm Olive. My role currently is International Lead for the Geospatial Commission. But before joining the Geospatial Commission in Cabinet Office, I was the GIS manager in Avon Somerset for 5 years, or maybe 6 years actually. And then before that, I was using GIS and the power of location as a senior crime analyst and teaching all our criminal intelligence analysts to make the most of location data for investigation and analysis using GIS.
Okay, so I guess to sort of question to the pair of you, and I think I mean Andy, it'd be good if you could sort of go first. But the kind of journey of Geo or GIS as it probably was when it going that far back. What was kind of what did you perceive that Geo to be at the time, and I guess how did what was the journey you were expecting to take with Geo, and I guess where did across to yourself, Olive, will be, I guess how much of it was Olive coming forward with ideas and how much of it was sort of a strategic plan set out by the leadership team and yourself?
Well, so the journey of sort of Geo and its place in Avon and Somerset and our vision for policing has been it was a solution or part of the solution for an age-old problem. And the age-old problem is who's dangerous, who's vulnerable, where might a crime happen, and what can we do to stop it? That's been a lifelong obsession for me, to try and understand how we can do that. And history's littered with examples of crimes that were preventable if only we joined up the dots of data that would help us understand what we could do to prevent it, to intervene early, to stop the misery, and to save countless cost. And actually, when you talk about data and dots and a blizzard of information and risk, location is right at the heart of all of it. So when I arrived in Avon and Somerset, we were responding to, amongst many other things, a preventable murder of a vulnerable man. And I made a commitment to that man's family that I would do everything I could to prevent that sort of thing happening again. And then up steps Olive and other members of the team to say that they've got some ideas about how they can do that with some products and applications, which frankly, being a bit of a skeptic, I didn't believe was possible. But of course, my expectations have been exceeded on every level. And I guess it's time for Olive now to tell a bit of the story.
Yeah, I think for me, because I was already a convert, I did my master's in GIS but it was applied to environment problems, so flooding, that kind of stuff. But when I think I got excited by the whole policing and being able to make a difference in the community and bringing my skills. And as an analyst, I realized, so you got the national intelligence model that tells you to, give you a framework to how to look at prevention, long-term approach for policing, or how to kind of look at emerging patterns and things like that. And obviously it was a critical, Geo was a critical part of that national intelligence model, but actually it wasn't that prominent in the whole training and the whole package. Obviously I could see it in it, how it could be like a massive part of it. So this is why I was kind of applying as an analyst. But then when I guess that position of GIS manager came up, for me that was the next step. It was like, it's not just a criminal intelligence analyst tool or capability. It could be applied, geospatial could be applied for anything. It could be applied on how to manage your resources. It could be applied on how to manage your offenders, for offender management. It could be applied, for patrolling and working out if a measure that has been implemented after you've done some analysis and proposed a solution, whether it actually has an impact or not. So it's good because there were so many, and actually we've got so many different business areas, which when I was an analyst, I didn't have a dab at so much. Then when I became a GIS manager, my purpose was to, well, let's see how we can apply that geo thinking in terms of all these different business areas and making sure that we become super efficient and I guess get that next level of being ahead of the time, I guess. But yeah, so that's how it kind of grew, and I kind of became that geo evangelist effectively. So yeah.
So I guess as that first stage, and Andy, you've got this problem to solve. Olive's coming forward with ideas and ways to solve these problems. I guess, what's phase one of that plan? Because there's a lot of areas and enablers to actually, made the success that obviously you've had at Avon and Somerset. So how do you start that plan out? What are the key things you're looking at?
Well, what I think that there's some ingredients to the magic sauce, Kyle, and one of the ingredients is that people like Olive with the vision and the skills to make a difference need to be supported and empowered to do their stuff. But actually bringing that sort of insight together with practitioners to help create tools and applications that make them even better at their jobs is where the real magic happens. And so one of the, as Olive has pointed out, location really has got a locus in everything, obviously. But one of the earliest, we call them sort of power applications, where location became a fundamental part of succeeding, was, I call it a problem-solving app. Another ingredient to the magic sauce is that you democratize the insight. So there's no point Olive making something which is fantastic and it's only used by me and the senior managers. I mean, we're not the people doing the job, are we? So what we did was share this problem-solving app with all of the PCSOs and all of the beat managers, and even Somerset. It's about 700. It's updated in near real time. That's another bit of the magic sauce. And it will tell them what's happening where around crime and offending patterns. It's self-serve. So it actually takes tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds of cost out, and people take responsibility then to look at the problem-solving app about who's the power few that are taking most of our demand resources, whether that's the power few of vulnerable people or offenders that overlap. Where are they, and what can we do with our patrolling patterns of behavior and activities that might intervene to prevent it? So that was one of the earliest power applications, but getting people involved using the 5,000, 6,000 free brains that work for Avon and Somerset to try and bring problems to Olive that she knows how to solve has been the magic sauce for us. Now, what we've got now is over 100 different applications that are bespoke to different roles and responsibilities, and many of them, I'm happy to talk about some more, have got location and geo as a fundamental aspect of it.
Yeah, I guess it's across to you all, because everybody hears sort of what Andy said, and it's that it's where police aspires to. It's what lots are on the journey to. I guess from a GIS manager, from a practitioner, Andy doesn't see the warts and alls that goes towards creating these applications. So I guess it would be good to hear a few of the examples that, not just the one that Andy's mentioned, but other areas, and I guess how you joined up these data silos and these different business areas to disseminate and democratize information back out to the officers.
Yeah, and I think, Andy's right, the democratization is the key, and I think this is where also as public sector, and it's using money from the taxpayer, this is where you're going to get the best return on investment. The more people use the setup that you've already purchased or spend money to put together, the more you're going to get results, and therefore the more it's worth it. So my tactic was this, basically. We already had some key users. I said the analysts were key users, but obviously command and control is a key user of always been of mapping and geospatial information. And it was about, so we've got the setup for this. How can we broaden it up to business functions? And like Andy said, I think it was a slow process, because obviously I had to learn what the other business function were doing, what were useful, what was not useful. So it's about like, you know, that communication with the practitioners and saying, okay, I've got an idea. This is maybe something that could be useful. Would it be useful? And then if they, you know, kind of explain the process, explain what would be the benefits, and then that's where you start having a conversation where they say, well, actually it wouldn't work because of this, or it would work. Yeah, that is really exciting because of that. And this is where you can start having that proof of concept, get it tested, and if it's good, you just run with it, and that's another app done. And then you could go for another business area. So it's kind of slow because obviously you don't want to rush it. You want to do, maybe pick the areas where there's going to be the most benefit, like in terms of people using it as well, rather than the small area. But then maybe sometimes, I think it worked in two ways. Sometimes we had the ideas, but sometimes people would come up saying, I want to do this, how do I do it? And then we'll be, oh yeah, you can do it using geospatial. And okay, we'll have a think about it, and then we'll come up with a solution and you tell us if it's good or not. So yeah, it's communication, I think, is a big part of like making sure it works.
And it's quite interesting in both of your responses there. I think Oliver, you mentioned taxpayers and return on investment. Andy obviously mentioned cost, and like you said, there's a growth in GIS technology over those 5 or 6 years as well, from those traditional silos that the technology had to evolve with yourselves, so you can actually roll it out into these other areas that you've mentioned. I guess almost taking how do you, I guess from your point on it, how do you become convinced that this is the journey to go on? You know, people use the term sort of snake oil salespeople or certain software, you know, it's vaporware and all these things. How do you validate as a GIS manager, as a chief consultant, how do you validate that this is a journey worth going on, that, you know, this is something that will benefit the force, and, you know, because it is, as Olive said, it is taxpayers' money. How do you review that sort of journey to embark on it in the first place? Because I don't think you ever knew it was going to grow to this size, maybe first of all. So how did you assess it?
Well, what we found when Olive and other members, tiny number of people, stepped forward and said, we think we can help you solve some of these problems. I said, that sounds unbelievable. I've always had an interest in data and statistics and maps and place. And what was being described to me, the way that we join it all up, federate our databases, stick fingers into all of them and pull the relevant data out, including place, and use it in some way that would help professionals make good decisions, sounded too good to be true. So what I said is, you've got 3 months to prove to me that this is going to add some value. And actually, within those 3 months, I'd seen enough to set a very clear vision that this is going to touch every corner of our organisation within 12 months. And you know, whether it did or didn't is another question. But what I would say is that if you're buying any technology or you're buying any software, and you're a boss, you're an executive, actually, you know, money is easily spent. Whether it's actually spent for the benefit of taxpayers is a point you're making, Kyle. Actually, I would say a big part of a project like this is around the cultural change, leadership, operationalization of the tools that are created. Then it must be incredibly frustrating to people like you, and indeed Olive, to actually have some insight about how good something could be and how the world could be different if only people would use the software and tools better. Actually, that's where people like me come in. And actually, one of the ways in which we've achieved that in Avon and Somerset is to make sure that people working developing the tools, like Olive, are doing it in partnership with people, practitioners who are passionate and understand the insight. And then actually change spreads like a virus through the organisation, like a social change movement. So you get the early people are the innovators. For us, that was Olive. And then you get your early adopters, your late adopters, your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. And actually, I would proudly claim Avon and Somerset is the most data-driven police force in Avon in England and Wales. Actually, you know, how far are we on the journey of maximising the benefit of the software and capabilities available? I don't even think we're at 20% yet. But we're a lot further ahead of many private sector and public sector organisations because of the amount of sharing of good practice we do. I know that that's the case. And so this is invaluable stuff, Carl, and where, you know, it's the future. I estimate that Avon Somerset absorbs probably 10 million pieces of data a day. A lot of them are about a geo. A lot of them, probably, if you were to categorize them, the biggest chunk of geo. Now, actually, is that data a blizzard that blinds practitioners, or do we help harness it and use it to make smart decisions? Now, that's what we've done. You talked about taxpayers' benefit. I can give you lots of examples about how we've saved money, saved lives, improved services through this. But actually, I'd say it's probably the biggest contributor to the fact that this force is one of a tiny handful that's graded as outstanding for our efficiency, the way in which we spend those taxpayers' money. And that's something I'm also passionate about.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously then this idea of, you know, it's not just the tech, it's not just the, I guess, the cost, it's this transformational change. Again, you know, often we can get caught up in buzzwords of things like transformational change and cultural change, but how do you actually implement that within these different organizations? So how do you know, so for Ollie, from your side of closing that gap with the business, how do you go about exposing tech to, you know, the GIS tech to these teams? Is it training? Is it workshops? How you know, how do you go about informing the users but equally getting that feedback loop closed as well?
I think there's I don't think there's one approach is right. I think there's a combination of ways you can do things to make sure you kind of wrap it up well. So, you know, for example, one of our basic apps, which probably most police force have, so that's nothing revolutionary about that, but it's like a web app where anybody in the force can go in and basically create a map and print it off, and with like some level of information that they can download by a search. Well, that if you wanted to train everyone, it would take ages. It would, because there's 5,000 staff. So what we did was, for this, we did like a link to video tutorials where it was really short videos, like 20 seconds for each of the buttons, so people knew what the buttons were, or if they needed to do something specific, they could just look at that one and nothing else. But for other things like specific apps for a business area, and if the business areas is quite small, you might just do a one-day training and make sure you're there on standby for the first few weeks where they, you know, start using it. So I think it really depends, and I think as a GIS manager, you need to recognize the different how your users are interacting with it, and how much resources you've got available as well, to kind of fine tune it and make sure you find the best balance. For analysts, for example, they're using the full spectrum of the GIS software, desktop software, and that could be, you know, 7 days training non-stop for each analyst. But you need to kind of prioritize, okay, what do they need to know for their work, you know, in practice. Forget about the other 36 buttons that actually are good for, you know, retail or logistics or something. Just focus on the one that might be useful for them, and then shorten the package so they're not taken out of their operation as well. Because that's the other thing. You need to consider the time spent in training for them, but also in terms of having to deliver the job they're supposed to be doing. So yeah, it's just a balance, really, I think.
And within that balance, you know, it's a Police Digital have their strategies, and NPTC have their strategies, and one that, you know, sort of underpins everything is this sort of digitally enabled workforce, or, you know, digitally enabled officer, whatever whatever you want to kind of brand it. How do you I guess how do you look at data literacy? Because it, you know, again, when you're at the forefront of it, you can be pushing, as I think Andy mentioned before, data out to an officer, but, you know, and there's various tools, and you can go into all kind of GIS worlds around chloroplex and hotspots and hexagon bins and all kinds of things. But how do you filter through that to ensure that, okay, you're skilling your officers to understand that data literacy, but equally, like you've said, training doesn't need to be at a maximum because the tools are intuitive for the officer to understand, you know, exactly what to do and what they're looking for in that self-serve capacity?
Carl, I'd say that, you know, I can give you some sort of plain English interpretations. I hope they are anyway. So I would look at, you know, how do you spread this revolution, this data geo revolution? Actually, it's quite important that people like Olive make beautiful products that help people do their job better. because actually I'm fortunate enough to work with 5,000 people who are passionate about keeping communities safe. And if we can make them a self-serve application, which is as intuitive as the software they use on their home devices, then actually most of them are going to start drawing it down and using it because they care about what they do. I would call that the cultural soft wiring. The hard wiring is that some of our applications containing geo aspects are hardwired into the way we work. So policing, like any statutory delivered service, is full of processes, rule books, if you like, about the way which things should be done. And actually what we've done is, because the data and the applications are so good, so insightful at giving people the information they need to make smart decisions, we hardwire them into those business processes. And that's led to really, really significant improvements in efficiency and effectiveness. So those are the two of the ways. I think the other thing that we do is you find out who's passionate, and you create a group of super users, DigiSpocs, Data Spocs, people across the whole organization that understand how to get the best out of this. And then even if you are a laggard, you're going to look over the shoulder of these people and say, that's brilliant, show me how to do it, please. Now, it might be those are the last people we get to, but actually that's how knowledge and insight spreads through an organization like a virus, as opposed to formal classroom training, which frankly, in my experience, can be pretty unsuccessful. You know, you channel people through, it takes months. Unless they use the knowledge very quickly, they'll lose it again. So there are more nimble, agile ways of spreading the information. And then the last, like Olive said, there's so many ways in which we do this, but the power of storytelling is really important to humans. And so I never miss an opportunity as chief to tell stories about how we're using geo successfully to catch criminals and protect vulnerable people. And actually, whenever I meet people, if I think it's an application or a tool they should be using, and they tell me something which doesn't sound quite right, everyone's got mobile data now, it all works on mobile data. I say, will you just show me a minute? I just want to check what you've said. And actually, that's another way to get people's attention. There's no point having power and influence in life if you don't want to use it to try and make the world a bit of a better place. So those are some of the things I enjoy doing.
Yeah, and I guess from that sharing best practice standpoint, it's obviously, you know, workshops internally in the power of storytelling.
And so I've done show and tells to MPs in Westminster, in the force area, to elected members at every level. I've done show and tells to police chiefs, to College of Policing and Majesty's inspectors, indeed globally. And so we've sought to support others in getting the best from the software, which, as Olive pointed out, many of them have already paid for it. And actually, so what I'm talking about, the magic sauce about how do you get the best out of it. And it's why Avon and Somerset does feature at lots of different levels on various boards, whether it's innovation boards, data science boards, data insight boards across government. And so we're looking to share it, Carl, and I think this is the future.
And I guess looking at that, it's interesting, the sort of power, influence, sort of follow. I guess what kind of lessons learned would you share with, you know, fellow forces? You know, kind of like you said, this special sauce, sort of that you mentioned earlier on. This mix, the kind of things that may have struggled or caused Avon and Somerset to struggle with adoption or hindered some of your sort of advancements. What kind of things were you sharing with other forces to give them insight on their programs?
So it needs to be led from the top. So I always want to see a pretty senior person, if not the chief or the leader of an organization, to explain what we're doing. You need to do it in partnership with your workforce so that it's practitioner informed and it's not simply an IT or a technical program. I think democratization is so important. There's no point having insight if you don't share it with the people who really need it. And then that nimble and agile way of spreading it across your organization are all important lessons. But you mentioned earlier, we need a data literate workforce. And that's something which the College of Policing are taking an active role in developing. And so this journey that Avon and Somerset has been on, we're in our 6th year now of really putting our foot on this. But actually, you know, many forces are in their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. We've all got a long way to go, all of us, including Avon and Somerset. and that parallels the power of geo and data in the private sector. So there's lots of insight I'd share, and certainly the storytelling about the value add, and which is part of the reason why I'm talking to you today. This has utterly transformed our organisation for the better, and I feel as though we barely even started.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from a senior perspective and the, I guess, political arena, do you see moving forward that sort of projects like your own with data-driven and geo-driven policing, do you see them actually being easily migrated into wider programs, i.e. something that can be grown from, almost using a police force like Avon and Somerset as a development kind of centre for this kind of technology for other forces to adopt, or do you think it's something that should be top down, or because it is a difficult political landscape in that sense with various projects and, like you said, various departments and things involved?
Yeah, so I'm engaged politically at every level, and I've shown Kit Malthouse, Policing Minister, many of our applications on several occasions, and like any other stakeholder, he loves it. This is fantastic. What I would say that we live in a modern global society with mega trends, and there's always going to be a tension between the local and the national, the central and the devolved. And actually, because humans are drawn to binary ideas, we tend to see sort of between the centralized and the localized. Whereas actually there's great merits in both models. Both models are necessary in a balanced ecosystem of service delivery, and policing is no different to that. So if you then say, well, let's treat policing as a system and not 43 forces, what's the glue that joins the system together? Well, some of the glue is leadership. It's where the College of Policing comes in. But another powerful piece of glue is the data, and actually sharing data, democratizing data, creating a single version of the truth about what's going wrong is such a powerful thing. So that helps join up the top down and the bottom up. In terms of how we're sharing this project, there's a couple of things. It's too complicated to go top down. That's just too much to bite off. Too many mouthfuls of the elephant. So what I would advocate is a bottom up, top down approach. So in the Southwest, the other chief constables have agreed that we're going to get a regional project. There is a regional project up and running to share all of our data and create some of these geo apps that will transform all of our business. And imagine how much more powerful that will be if we can have the insight of the whole Southwest Peninsula. At the same time, I'm a member of the advisory group that is looking at the manifesto commitment to deliver a world-class crime data lab. That's the top-down bit. And Kyle, I've said that I don't like binary solutions. There's room for both in this world, and it's a privilege for me to have had a foot in both camps.
Yeah, and Ollie obviously joining us back. I guess we were sort of asking and kind of the lessons learned around what kind of, if you're sharing information with another force, what lessons would you share with that other force? Kind of things that stunted Avon and Somerset's progression at times that actually, if you shared with them, could expedite another force's adoption of geo in a more advanced way.
So we're talking about maybe sharing as a one-off, maybe, or just trying to think quickly. The first thing that comes into mind is that when you're trying to share records that are actually geolocation, is to make sure that we understand each other in terms of how we record that location. So whether it's if it's a location with a grid reference, to make sure that that's correct. But nowadays with addresses, if it's an address record, I think too many times we've had sharing of addresses between partners that wasn't police forces, but like maybe for community safety, when it's like a council or like vulnerable people. And actually one thing we found was the UPRN using the unique property reference number, which is now part of an address file, is really key to avoid too much personal data, but also to make sure that we can kind of match records together, which now, I don't know, obviously from the Geospatial Commission perspective, now UPRN is an open file. So you know, it's even easier to do that kind of stuff. But anyway, that doesn't matter for the public sector because it's under the public sector geospatial agreement. But that would be one way. I'm sorry I missed a bit of the conversation, so I don't know if I'm actually answering it wrong or not.
No, I guess it's those lessons learned. I mean, Andy mentioned quite a few of the organisations that he's spoken to. So everyone from kit Malthouses of the world to other professional bodies, and within policing, regional, national, Home Office, etc., where he's trying to share best practice. From a GIS manager standpoint, I guess how have you been able to share best practice with other forces? What mechanisms are kind of in place for you to share these lessons learned?
Yeah, I think one of the main forum, I guess, that in terms of for geo specifically, not just data and data science and all that kind of stuff, but for geo specifically, there is a national forum called it's not got an official name, but it's kind of a national GIS and gazetteer group, which is basically a bit of a network of all the people that have an interest or are responsible for GIS and gazetteers in the various police forces. And there's a couple of chairs. I used to chair that group, obviously now left. So my very capable colleagues, Ben O'Hara from North Yorkshire and Richard Healy from Gwent are carrying on doing that. And then it was a great way to kind of get together to talk about our common challenges or what worked well, but also what we used to do. We used to get intervenant from outside, so whether interesting things that was happening in other sectors that we could learn from, and also like some kind of new tech that's coming up that they can come and talk to us. So that was quite useful. But I always felt that it was very poorly attended, and it was always the same people that were keen to come. And I think because geo is widely misunderstood, I think, in the world of data, it kind of seen as something a bit too complicated to understand, so therefore left aside, and we'll leave it to the professional to deal with. Because of that, there's less interest in other forces, especially, sometimes there's nobody in other forces that have got that role of leading GIS or doing GIS. So that means that those forces can't benefit from the best practice and the sharing of ideas and knowledge and problems. So that was one frustrating bit. I would have wished to have a more cohesive, way of doing it, and it was a bit ad hoc. If someone do it, we kind of organize a meeting, everybody tries to come up, but it's not like it's not a profession. But I'd say though, one profession that was quite useful is the government geography profession, which is for anybody who's geo orientated. Obviously, for those who not, then might not be that useful. But it kind of links up. It's like a forum as well that you can link up with other GIS or geospatial professionals in other organisations within the public sector, which is quite good to kind of bounce ideas. And then there's also a data science one as well in government. So people that are more into data and data science, that's a good one as well. And there's always a geo question in there as well. So, sometimes it's actually quite good to be within lots of different networks. And because, sometimes when you got a problem, it's like a needle in a haystack. And the more you talk and the more you share it, actually, the more you're going to find the idea. I'm always a good advocate of asking questions, as long as it's not sensitive, obviously, but to kind of otherwise one brain is obviously less effective than multiple one together. So
yeah, and I think that's probably part of the move to and Andy's mentioned the digitally enabled sort of officer and staff as well, is that there's policing communities, and I guess sharing that best practice with other forces and other peers in other forces, other GIS managers, etc. But equally, other professional bodies. So actually, the same problems around demand are being assessed in other utilities organisations and banking organisations, and in every other organisation, retail, etc. And how do you take? Okay, your data is different, but actually they're asking probably very similar questions that you're asking, and expanding that network of people is kind of key. And I think yourself, Olive, you've been part of obviously the Women in Geospatial. So from a personal standpoint, it's helped kind of you to raise your profile and speak to a wider community of GIS professionals. I guess going into the kind of the policing community, what do you see geo being in the future for policing? Where do you kind of see that moving to? I guess yourself first, Andy.
Well, let me just close off the point you were just making. We've been really lucky in Avon and Somerset, I think partly because of the reputation we've gained from the work of people like Olive, to win some Home Office funding to look at how we extend our approach to data and geo into other organisations. And so I've done lots of shows and tells with many, many local authorities, all of them within the Avon and Somerset area and beyond, and other organisations and ambulance services. And what we experience in the public sector certainly is this concept of the power few. The power few tends to be a small number that actually will absorb a significant amount of your resources, because that's where your repeat demand comes from, and that's where your vulnerability comes from. Now, actually, all of us, local authorities, health, ambulance, education, have got massive overlap on our power few. So what we've pioneered within Bristol, and we're looking to spread it to Somerset and then hopefully beyond, is an approach to data sharing, including geo, that helps us understand the causes and symptoms of these problems and intervene early to reduce harm and alleviate taxpayer spend. Now, in this new globalized world that we work in, this new world, joined up world, where demand is growing and resource levels tend to be falling, COVID's been a blip. Actually, we need to work together smarter. Now, I talked about the glue that joins the system together. There is glue that joins this community together. And so when we think about the new concept of integrated care systems that look to improve the lifespan, health and independence of our population, using geo and data to help inform the provision of sensible pathways and links between organisations to serve our residents and our community in ways which are more efficient and more effective and more bespoke to them. Data and geo joins it up. It's the glue. Now, I don't believe that the system has truly yet discovered that, but it's going to, as the demand and resource scissors of doom, as I call them, bite in the next few years.
I like that comment. I like that term, scissors of doom. And I guess it's the same to yourself. Where do you see geo in policing going? I guess are the things you kind of wish you could have done at Avon and Somerset? I guess that's, you created a plan before you left, and the things that were left on it to do. And is that where geo should go? And what about even further, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if we can even look that far ahead?
I mean, I'd like, as I said, to continue on the trajectory, obviously, but I'm not in charge anymore, so that's how it rules. But I think in terms of general in policing, I think there's a huge opportunity for policing with geospatial. I mean, we know, for example, when you look at the Canadian police, like Toronto police, or police forces in the US, they use geospatial so much to do their day-to-day activity. And I think we are missing the trick in general. I'm not talking about Avon Somerset. I think in the UK, there are some good forces, but there are some forces that are quite behind, I guess. And sometimes it's just because of the legacy, the systems, it's just, there's loads of reasons why, but it's very disparate as well. So I think I heard that Andy was saying about a regional plan for Southwest. I think that would be really good, because it'll kind of start equalizing the level of adoption. But I think one thing I'd like as well to do is not to focus on the output. So yes, the apps are beautiful and funky and useful, but actually no app will be good enough if the data and the foundation or the infrastructure is not robust enough. And data quality is a huge part of it, and sometimes having addresses recorded in the right way so you can spot multiple location or duplicates is really important. So I think having that accessibility and the quality of data there to make the application worthwhile is very important. So I'd like to see that. And then finally, I think if I had a wish list, that would be my final one. I'd love to see Geo in the digital transformation programs. I've never seen a digital strategy where actually specifically have a space for location in there. I always felt like I was the one saying, you forgot the geospatial, needs to be in there. And so I know the policing digital strategy has been coming out not long ago. And I think Mission 3 is about, pushing users and bringing the capability of digital to the users and the staff. And I think we need to make sure that the geospatial is in there because it's a part of data, but it's an essential part. It's, like any other data, it needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and do you see that being a national geo role being created? I mean, even from an NPCC perspective, obviously you'll know yourself, Andy, that each chief has a responsibility for certain areas of policing to have a national geo lead within the NPCC, so that you've got that senior leadership and it's dealt with in the same capacity as other areas of policing. Is that the role that needs to be created to solidify geo within the digital and IT world and operational world moving forward?
That would help give it some prominence and leadership, so long as it was the right person, of course. Otherwise it would be a hollow and pointless gesture that would just lead to more confusion. But I've felt for some time actually that there probably isn't the clarity within the National Police Chiefs Council network of leadership about where data analytics, let alone geo, sits, and so I think some clarity around that would help.
Yeah. And I guess with kind of new roles on the horizon for yourself, Andy, and underway for yourself, Olive, in the Geospatial Commission, what is your experience at Avon and Somerset? I guess, have you taken it with you, Olive, and what do you plan taking with you, Andy, moving forward?
So I'm finishing my contract here on the 1st of July. That will be 5.5 years as chief in Avon and Somerset, and previously to that 3 as chief in Hampshire. So I'm not looking for another chief constable's job of a territorial force car, but I'm very much looking to use my knowledge and experience, including in data literacy, digital transformation, organizational leadership and change. I want to take that knowledge and experience into a field where I can add value and make a difference, and I'm pretty sure those opportunities will open up.
Yeah. And I guess yourself, Olive, what's gone with you? What's gone with you with Geospatial? What kind of have been the key bits to help you in your current role?
I think one thing I've learned from working in Avon Somerset is that it always helps for selling Geospatial, because obviously that's what I had to do. I had to sell it. Is to make sure you have those right stories, like Andy was saying, and I'm taking that the same way for my new role. It's about looking at all the different sectors, finding those good examples that are being done in different places of the world, not in policing only, but all other areas, transport and everything. So it's just finding those really good examples and how you can use that story to promote it and learn from it.
I think Kyle, also, future developments. I think democratization is going to be at the heart of it. So giving all of our practitioners the knowledge, information and insight that Geo can offer them, relevant to their role, but moving that into that takes quite a shift in your IT capability to be able to manage some of that, and also there are constantly new developments and opportunities, never mind practitioners ones, but for instance 3D mapping and other Geo opportunities.
Yeah, and I guess this kind of we've covered a whole breadth of subjects, and it's been fantastic sort of today. And I guess to round up, I'll actually probably get one from yourself, Andy, and sort of two from Oliver as the practitioner. If you're going to give sort of 3 summary points from today's session from your experience, those kind of leaving notes for anybody that's tuned in, what would they be? So I guess, Andy, yourself, what kind of one thing on the list of three would you suggest is something that an organisation has to implement or has to take into consideration for Geo to be successful?
I would say encouraging a data literate workforce that are Geo aware and Geo curious.
Yeah. And yourself, Oliver, sort of adding on to Andy's point, what can you think would be the sort of enablers to success for Geo?
I guess get a GIS manager that's nice and resilient, but also super passionate, so you can bring those conversation and then make that click in people's mind to enable the curiosity and the rest.
Yeah. So I think I've learned a lot from today's session. I think it's been absolutely fantastic. So I thank you both for your time and for joining us. And I hope you have success at the Geospatial Commission and success for whatever's next for yourself, Andy.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And never fear, a geographer's here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.